17 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few running backs I have as sleepers this week. The first guy, Royce Freeman of the Houston Texans. So Royce Freeman, he's getting the bulk of the carries over the last couple weeks here for this Texan team. I know he's not going out there and putting up huge numbers, but he's definitely a sleeper option and a guy who wouldn't be surprising to me that could get fantasy owners anywhere from 10 to 12 fantasy points this week. Week 15 versus Kansas City, 11 carries, 51 yards a catch, 5 yards. And week 16 in Tennessee, 16 carries, 32 yards a catch for 6 yards. So right here, week 17, a good matchup on paper versus Jacksonville that gives up the 9th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. But this is a game where they're probably going to be chasing points. This Jacksonville team obviously has gotten better over the last few weeks and playing great football. But hey, if you're in a pinch and need a guy who's at least getting a workload, I got Freeman as a sleeper this week. The next guy, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. Surprisingly, he's still out there in 61% of fantasy leagues. In the last few weeks here, he's definitely putting up numbers in a decent capacity here. So over week 14 in Seattle, 14 carries, 74 yards in that one, and a touchdown, 3 catches, 25 yards. Week 15 versus Pittsburgh, 4 carries, 10 yards, 3 catches, 57 yards. And week 16 versus Detroit, a monster ball game, 12 carries only, but 125 yards in that one. So Hubbard in this running game's been going well over the last few weeks. And this week here, I know it's a tough matchup at Tampa Bay, but he's the receiving back out of the backfield here is Chuba Hubbard, with Foreman obviously being in between the tackles and short yardage. So right now, if you need a guy as a flex option in the deepest of leagues as your number 2 running back, he's a sleeper this week. And the third and final running back I have is a sleeper, Zach Moss of the Indianapolis Colts. So believe it or not, last week Moss, he had the majority of the snaps in that ball game and the carries over Deion Jackson with 12 carries, 65 yards a catch, and 5 yards. And this week here, not a bad matchup at the New York Giants that are definitely vulnerable to the run, even though I know they're only giving up the 17th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. We've seen some teams run for big games versus Giant defense. We saw it with the Eagles. We saw it twice with the Dallas Cowboys this season. And right here, if this Colt team wants to have any chance to stay in this ball game, I think Zach Moss is going to get a decent amount of work in this one. And he's a guy that's good for short yardage goal line work as well. So he's a guy that possibly, if you need 10, 12 fantasy points from him, he could do it. So that's a few running backs I have as sleepers here for week 17 of the fantasy football season.